Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we've got an absolutely incredible story for you. It's about a four-legged soldier and the massive global conflict that made him a legend.
So could a stray dog actually become a war hero? I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? But believe it or not, it's a true story. And to get to the bottom of it, we've got to go back, way back to 1917, on the training grounds of Yale University. Yeah, that's where it all kicks off.
All right, so picture this. America's 102nd Infantry Regiment is getting ready. They're training for the big war in Europe. And one day, this little stray dog with a cool tiger-striped coat just starts hanging around. It doesn't take long for him to really hit it off with this young private, a guy named J. Robert Conroy.
Well, the soldiers started calling him Stubby, and honestly, he was just what they needed, a huge boost to morale. So huge, in fact, that the whole no dogs allowed rule, that just kind of got ignored. And get this, he even learned to salute. He'd raise his paw right to his eyebrow. So when it was finally time to ship out to France, there was no way Conroy was leaving him behind. He actually smuggled Stubby right onto the transport ship. So they get to France, and that clever little salute, it totally won over the commanding officer. Just like that, Stubby became the official mascot. But here's the thing, he was about to become so much more than that. Over the next 18 months, he served in 17 different battles on the Western Front. This is where he goes from being a cute mascot to an absolute battlefield legend. And his contributions, they were just incredible. After getting injured in a mustard gas attack, his sense of smell became like a superpower. He could detect incoming gas attacks and would run through the trenches barking like crazy to warn the soldiers, saving who knows how many lives. Out on the battlefield in that chaos they called no man's land, he would find wounded men and bark until the medics showed up. But his most famous move? Capturing a German spy. By himself. Yeah, you heard that right. For capturing an enemy spy all on his own, he literally bit the guy and held him down until the American soldiers got there. Stubby was promoted to sergeant. He became the very first dog in U.S. history to ever be given a military rank. A sergeant! Can you believe it? But, being a hero on the front lines comes with a price. He was badly wounded by shrapnel from a German grenade, took hits to his chest and leg. And yet, even while he was recovering, what does he do? He goes around the infirmary, visiting the other wounded soldiers, just trying to lift their spirits. It's just incredible. And all of this bravery, this entire story, it's all happening on the brutal stage of a war that would literally reshape the entire world. So to really truly get what Stubby went through, we need to zoom out a bit and understand the war he was fighting in. Because this wasn't just any conflict. There's a reason they called it the Great War. Basically, the entire world was split into these two huge military coalitions. You had the Central Powers, that's Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. And then on the other side, you had the Allied Powers, which is the side Stubby and the US joined up with in 1917. And the scale of this thing, it was just staggering. I mean, look at these numbers from right at the start of the war back in 1914. The Allies had more than double the population to pull soldiers from. We're talking about a massive mobilization of people and resources, the likes of which the world had never seen. It was really setting the stage for some truly unprecedented destruction. This war raged on for 4 long years. In the end, it brought down 4 huge empires and caused so much death and destruction that, the Great War was the only name that seemed to fit. It was a total game changer, a real turning point for the 20th century.
So you gotta be asking, how does a war this enormous even start? Well, it wasn't a slow burn. It was more like an explosion, a spark that lit a fuse, and it all started with a single gunshot in a city called Sarajevo. It was a total domino effect. Once the Archduke of Austria-Hungary was assassinated, this tangled web of alliances just snapped into action. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Then Russia steps in to protect Serbia. Germany, who's allied with Austria-Hungary, declares war on Russia. Then France gets pulled in because they're allied with Russia. And the final domino? Germany invades neutral Belgium, and that's when Great Britain declares war on Germany. Boom! Just like that, in a little over a month, a local crisis had become a full-blown world war. Okay, so when the war finally ended in 1918, Sergeant Stubby came back home to the U.S., and he wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a genuine, bona fide national hero. But believe me, his story was far from over.
he became a total celebrity. He was meeting presidents, and I love this quote for the New York Times about him meeting Woodrow Wilson. It basically says that rank meant nothing to Stubby. Didn't matter if you were a private or the president, you got the same friendly handshake with his paw.
I mean, his life after the war was just as impressive as his time in the trenches. He was always the guest of honor, leading these huge parades all over the country. He met not one, not two, but 3 different U.S. presidents. And while his owner, Robert Conroy, went to law school at Georgetown, who do you think became the university's official mascot? Yep, Stubby. And today, which is just the coolest part, his legacy lives on. You can actually go see him preserved at the Smithsonian Museum. You know, the story of Sergeant Stubby is such a great reminder that heroes can come from the most unexpected places. His courage, his loyalty, it all happened on the battlefields of one of the worst wars in history. It's really this timeless story about the incredible bond between people and their dogs. And it just makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other amazing stories like his has history forgotten?
All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're talking about a story that's both incredible and, honestly, pretty tragic. It's about a true pioneer who just happened to be a small, stray dog from Moscow. She was the very first living thing to ever orbit our planet. Her name was Laika. So, picture this. It's November 3rd, 1957. Laika makes history. She's aboard the Soviet satellite Sputnik 2, and she's literally venturing into the complete unknown. She circled our entire planet and, almost overnight, became this global symbol of our reach for the stars. And yeah, the whole world celebrated her. She was a hero. But here's the thing. The story everyone was told about her mission, it was a total myth, carefully crafted. So today, we're going to unravel that legend and get to the real story of Laika, a secret that was kept under wraps for almost 50 years.
So you have to wonder, who was this little cosmic pioneer before she became a household name? Let's go all the way back to the beginning.
Laika wasn't some specially bred dog, not at all. She was a survivor. Just a small, mixed-breed stray, maybe 2 years old, that they found wandering the streets of Moscow. You know, Soviet scientists actually went looking for strays on purpose. They figured they were tougher, and they thought female dogs were just better suited for the tiny spaces. And Laika, she had this calm, even-tempered personality, which made her the perfect candidate for the insane challenges they had planned.
And the preparation she went through, wow, it was incredibly rigorous. To get her used to that tiny Sputnik 2 capsule, they kept her in cages that got smaller and smaller over time. They even spun her in a centrifuge to get her body ready for the insane G-forces of a rocket launch. And she had to be trained to eat the special nutrient gel because that was the only kind of food you could really have in zero gravity.
But here's the thing. Laika's journey wasn't really just about science. It was a huge, strategic move in a high-stakes global chess match. I mean, you have to remember, this was the absolute height of the Cold War. Every single technological win was a way to show your ideology was superior. The US and the Soviet Union were completely locked in this frantic competition, the space race, to see who could conquer the final frontier first.
And the speed at which all this happened is just staggering. Think about it. October 4th, 1957, the Soviets shocked the entire world with Sputnik 1. Then, not even a month later, they launched Sputnik 2 with Laika on board. The pressure was just immense, and the US, they were still 3 months away from even getting their own satellite up there.
So why the crazy rush? Well, it turns out Soviet leadership wanted another massive space spectacle, and they wanted it to happen on the 40th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. And that political deadline, it meant there was absolutely no time to figure out how to bring the capsule back. So, from the very beginning, everyone knew this was a one-way mission.
Okay, so the whole world is watching. The Soviet Union needs a story, a good narrative. And just like that, the legend of Laika, the space hero, was born.
I mean, literally overnight, Laika becomes a global sensation. The press in the West even gave her this affectionate nickname, Muttnik, a mix of mutt and Sputnik. Her face was on newspapers, on merchandise all over the world. She was this furry little hero, bravely paving the way for humans to go to space. And for decades, this was the official story. The Soviet account said that Laika did her job perfectly, that she survived in orbit for almost a full week. Then, they claimed she was humanely euthanized with some poisoned food right before her oxygen was set to run out. It sounded so peaceful, right? A heroic end to a groundbreaking mission. But that story, the one the entire world believed for 45 years, It just wasn't true. The reality was, well, it was a lot more grim.
It actually took until 2002 for the truth to come out. There was this event, the World Space Congress in Houston, and a Russian scientist who was actually on the Sputnik 2 mission, Dmitry Malyshenkov, he's the one who finally set the record straight.
And the data from her last moments, it paints a really terrifying picture. During the launch itself, the G-forces and the shaking were so intense, the Laika's pulse, they were monitoring it with electrodes. It shot up to 3 times its normal rate. That's a textbook sign of extreme panic and stress.
So that heroic week-long journey the world was told about? Nope. Her actual time in orbit was tragically short. Laika only survived for about 5 to 7 hours after liftoff.
So what went wrong? Well, those life support and temperature control systems, the ones that were rushed to meet that political deadline, they failed. The temperature inside that tiny capsule just soared, and ultimately Laika died from a combination of extreme overheating and panic.
When you put them side by side, the contrast is just stark. You've got the official story, a calm, week-long mission with a peaceful ending, and then you have the reality, a short, terrifying ordeal that ended because of a system failure. That's the huge gap between the myth and the tragic truth of her final hours.
So even though her mission ended so tragically and the truth was hidden for so long, Laika's legacy is absolutely undeniable. It's like it continues to orbit our collective memory, you know?
And here's a detail that always gets me. Her name, Laika, it's the Russian word for barker. Just think about that. A small dog with a voice whose silent story was finally heard.
It took decades, but her sacrifice was eventually honored. In 2008, a monument was unveiled in Moscow, right near the research facility where she was trained. It's a small dog standing proudly on top of a rocket, immortalized forever.
Look, there's no doubt Laika's journey proved that a living creature could survive a launch and handle weightlessness. That paved the way for human cosmonauts like Yuri Gagarin. But her story really forces us to ask a tough question. Yeah, she was a pioneer, but she was an unwilling one. Her sacrifice was a monumental step forward, for sure. But it really makes you wonder, what's the ethical price we're willing to pay for progress?
All right, let's dig into the incredible true story behind a name that I bet a lot of you recognize, Balto. So, we all know the name, right? Balto, the hero dog who raced to save a town from a deadly epidemic. But here's the thing. What happened after he crossed the finish line? Because his journey, let me tell you, did not end there. The real story of his triumph, his pretty shocking fall from grace, and his final redemption, well, it's way more compelling than the myth. Okay, so to really get this, we've got to go back in time. Picture this. It's the winter of 1925 in Nome, Alaska. We're talking remote, isolated, and incredibly harsh. And in this little town, a deadly crisis was just starting to brew. So you've got this small town, about 1,400 people or so, and suddenly they're in huge trouble. The town's only doctor, Curtis Welch, starts seeing kids getting sick. At first he thinks, okay, maybe it's tonsillitis. But then they started dying, and he had to confirm his absolute worst fear, diphtheria. And to make things 1,000,000 times worse, the town's only supply of the life-saving medicine, it had expired. And the port, frozen solid. Nome was completely, utterly cut off from the rest of the world. And then there was the weather. I mean, we're not just talking cold. The conditions were just brutal. Temperatures were plummeting to lows that are hard to even wrap your head around. We're talking as low as 85 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. Can you even imagine what that feels like? It's just insane. So you've got this insane cold, and then you've got the distance. They actually found a supply of the medicine, but here's the catch. The train could only get it as far as a town called Nenana. That still left 674 miles of just nothing. Treacherous frozen wilderness between that life-saving serum and the people who were dying. Flying was a no-go. The planes back then were open cockpit, and there was just no way they could fly in a blizzard. So the governor, a guy named Scott C. Bone, had to make a call, a really big one. He decided to put the fate of an entire town in the paws of the most reliable transport they had, teams of sled dogs. And that's how it started, this incredible, desperate relay to get the serum to Nome. A journey that would go down in history as the Great Race of Mercy. The plan they came up with was, honestly, a work of genius.
They set up this non-stop relay. We're talking 20 different mushers and more than 150 of the toughest sled dogs you could find. Their one job? To pass this 20-pound package of medicine from one team to the next without stopping, day and night, all the way across the Alaskan wilderness. And this is where we meet our main characters, so to speak, both from the kennel of a legendary breeder, Leonhard Seppala. First, you have Togo. He's 12 years old, a total veteran, Seppala's go-to lead dog, a champ. And then you have Balto. He's younger, only 6, and he's what they called a freight dog. Basically, he was built for hauling heavy stuff, not for being the fast, nimble leader of the pack.
What's absolutely mind-blowing is that this whole thing, this relay, it was done in just over 5 days, a trip that would normally take a month. But it was that final, brutal leg of the race, the one that would create a legend, that was the most dangerous of all.
All right, so the musher for this part of the journey is Gunnar Kaasen. He worked for Seppala, and for his lead dog, he picked Balto. Yeah, the freight dog, the underdog. And together, they charged straight into a monster blizzard. We're talking total whiteout, can't see your hand in front of your face conditions.
It was so bad that at one point, Kaasen said a gust of wind literally picked his entire sled up off the ground and flipped it over. The medicine, the whole reason they were out there, went flying into a huge snowdrift. He had to frantically dig around in the snow with his bare hands, risking terrible frostbite just to find that container. And this is where Balto proves he's more than just a freight dog. In the middle of this blinding storm, he just stops dead in his tracks, refuses to move. Kaasen can't see a thing, so he goes up to see what's wrong. And he realizes they are inches away from plunging through the ice into a frozen river. Balto, using just his nose and his instincts, saved everyone. The team, Kaasen, and that precious medicine.
So, on February 2nd, 1925, they make it. Kaasen's team arrives in Nome. The town is saved, the outbreak is stopped. A huge sigh of relief, right? But in the chaos and excitement of the media coverage that followed, the story of who the real hero was, well, it got a little complicated.
Okay, so here's the deal. Balto becomes this global superstar, right? Because he's the one who led the team on that final 53-mile stretch into town. He crossed the finish line. But Togo, the 12-year-old veteran, he ran for 91 miles. 91! That's almost double Balto's distance, and it was over the single most dangerous part of the entire route. So, Balto is famous. He goes on tour, he gets a statue in his honor in New York Central Park. I mean, he's set for life, right? A hero's retirement. Nope, not even close. His story is about to take a really dark, really shocking turn. Unbelievably, the promoter who was touring with the dogs, he just sold them. Balto and 6 of his teammates. Gone. And their new owner stuck them in something called a dime museum in LA, which was basically a cruel, exploitative sideshow pretending to be an exhibit. Just look at how fast it happened. In February 1925, he's an international hero. By December, there's a statue of him in New York. And then, just 2 years later, he and his team are found chained up in this dark, miserable place, sick and completely neglected. It's just heartbreaking. But that's not where the story ends. Thankfully, because a total chance encounter was about to spark this amazing effort from people all over the country to give these dogs the life they deserved all along. So this businessman from Cleveland, George Kimball, just happens to be visiting this dime museum, and he sees the dogs, and he's just horrified, appalled. And he's not the kind of guy to just walk away. So he goes to the owner and strikes a deal. He can buy the dogs for $2,000. Then he gets the local paper, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, on board, and they launch a fund asking the public for help. And you know what? People responded. It was incredible. In just 10 days, money started pouring in from all over the place. We're talking kids donating their lunch money, people sending whatever they could spare. They didn't just meet the $2,000 goal, they blew past it, raising over $2,300 to save these hero dogs. And so on March 19th, 1927, Balto and his team came to Cleveland. And this time, there was no sad exhibit. The city threw a parade for them. They were welcomed as the heroes they truly were. They were taken to the Brookside Zoo, where they finally got to live out the rest of their days in comfort and with the dignity they had earned 1,000 times over. So when you look at Balto's whole story, I mean, from being this overlooked freight dog to a global celebrity, then a forgotten victim, and finally a beloved icon, it makes you think, doesn't it? It's so much more than just a story about a race. It really makes you ask, what is a hero? Is it just the one who crosses the finish line and gets all the attention? Or is it maybe the old veteran who runs the hardest, most dangerous miles when no one's watching? Or maybe it's the hero who, after all that, endures the worst with quiet strength, just waiting for a second chance.